the cases you've worked out, these are not small cases. These are heavyweight cases. Whether it's Michael Jackson, whether it's Jussie, and that was very controversial, whether it's, the other ones, Brown or Keisha, all of these things we can go through. How different of a jurisdiction, I am not a lawyer, how different is it dealing with the laws that we go by in the States, let alone dealing with somebody that you're representing who's in Romania? Do you have to, are you working with their laws? Do they kind of push you around? Do you hold them accountable to you because there is the U.S. citizenship? How do those dynamics work?
Sure. So I think typically in high profile cases already there are so many additional factors that go into representing a client that isn't there in a standard case, when the attorneys actually just get to focus on their defense, on the legal strategy, and it's very clear cut. And typically in those cases, the defendants also really are presumed innocent. So those cases are much easier to handle. The high profile cases, to begin with, once information is, and it's almost exclusively leaked by the prosecution or the police, the information comes out, it's always out of context. The defense can't really respond to it as far as to address the details, because there's an ongoing investigation. You're not supposed to be talking about those facts. So you're really at a disadvantage. And the public starts getting a false picture of what the case is about, what the evidence is. And so, already in a high profile case, you're dealing with the court of public opinion, everything that's coming out, combating the misinformation that's circulating. And so those are challenges. Now you add to that, all of this happening in a foreign jurisdiction. And yes, it makes it much more complicated. There's, difficulties. Like for now, I have not actually been able to visit the Tate brothers in jail. While I was in Bucharest, I went numerous times to the jail with my Romanian colleagues. We took all the paperwork. And I was told that it's ultimately the prosecutor's decision, and the prosecutor, until now, still hasn't approved the request. I mean, we're still trying, and hopefully I will get to see them. Of course, my preference would be to see them out of custody, but depending on the timing. However, it's difficult to, you're in a different time zone. All of the documents are in the Romanian language, so we have to have everything translated, or I'm relying on my Romanian counsel to interpret things for me. Their system is different. So it's, and the politics of it are different. So it's certainly very challenging.
Is that a protocol that the prosecutor can use according to the Romanian laws to not allow you to meet with your client? I mean, is that a common thing they do there? Or do you have leverage to say, no, I have to see my client. This is how the laws work?
So unfortunately, I don't think it's very common for U.S. attorneys, or I should say even attorneys who are not Romanian, to be trying to visit Romanian clients in jail. So it's not a common occurrence to begin with. And according to my Romanian counsel, they say this is how it works. It's standard. Now, if this was not the Tate brothers, would this have been approved by now? I'm not sure.
Does the role of I'll come back to that. So I guess my other question would be, when you were working with Jussie and he was being accused, or the things that he was going through with what happened to him, I believe he was not in jail when he was going through it, right? I know the detention, and I may be wrong, the detention here, this is the third round of 30 days, and they can go up to 180 days, but there's still, we still don't know fully what is going on. The key word that's being used is allegedly of human trafficking, allegedly of this. Once again, is this a common thing that Romania does as a government, to say, whether we have you or not, you got to be in here? Some of the times people don't know, they live around the world. American laws are different than Romanian laws, are different than German or UK. So it's to understand how these things work. So the whole 180 days that they have, we keep extending it at this pace. What are some of the criteria that you can use to get them to be at least at home while they're going through this?
So yes, this is very unusual for us, because this is not how our system works here in the US. Typically, and it varies a little bit by jurisdiction, but typically they have 48 hours to, hold you before they either have to charge you or release you. Romania has a different procedure, and they refer to it as preventative arrest, where they initially held the Tate brothers for 24 hours, and then they applied for a 30-day extension. And as you correctly said, they can extend that up to 180 days. So this period is actually still an ongoing criminal investigation. So they have not actually had an indictment returned against them. They have not been formally charged. And again, this is really contrary to our notions of justice, which is that, pretrial deprivation is really to be a measure of last resort, unless there's substantial factors warranting keeping somebody in custody, that they should be out. And when you said allegedly is a word that you use even, after the charges are filed. Here, we're not even there yet. We're still in an open criminal investigation.
Yeah.
And so if that answers your question, I think the process is very different in Romania than we're used to here in the U.S. and I think a lot of other places.
How are you as the attorney adapting to that? I mean, are you, I bet this is a tough job you have. I mean, you went to school here, you went to grade school, you've done phenomenal for yourself. So to learning how to work with the laws here to represent your client and then to go over there, are you like on a overdrive of learning all the laws and you're reading this and that to see what the adjustments are? Are you looking at all the cases? Is that kind of what you're going through as an individual?
Definitely. I'm doing a lot of research on how the Romanian process works, reading some of their cases and some decisions, even by the European courts, as to how they've applied Romanian law and whether they've sanctioned this type of conduct. I'm, of course, talking to my Romanian colleagues who are the best source of information as to what is common there. So there's a lot to take in, but obviously, when you asked how I'm dealing with it, for me, it's much easier to deal with as the attorney on the outside. It's much harder to see my clients who are in jail, and it makes my job a lot harder when I can't easily communicate with them. So that's the biggest, I think, factor here, is the fact that I would have stayed in Bucharest had I been granted access to visit with them frequently, but that's been the biggest challenge for me so far.
If that happened in America, you could make calls to get Congress or somebody, a senator or a congressman or congresswoman, to make the call and say, what is this all about? You can't be doing this, right? So who can you call? Because the part that makes it complicated with this, if you have a political figure, let's just say you have a political figure, and if they're a Democrat, the president's Democrat, well, you make the phone call. Hey, listen, this is if you have a Republican, Trump saying, hey, Roger Stone, hey, you got this. What is going on over here? Can you guys make the call? This doesn't make any sense. Who can you call to say this is not a fair thing they're doing?
I mean, who I did call when I was in Bucharest was the U.S. Embassy to see if I could get assistance with this. But they pretty much just deferred me to my Romanian counsel and said I have to work with them and follow the procedure that they recommend. So ultimately, they weren't really much help in me trying to achieve that.
How much of that do you think is because him being a controversial figure and he's called out pretty much everybody under the sun? They tell you there's 3 things you should never talk about. 2 of them are politics and religion. And my mother would always say, hey, Patrick, why are you talking politics? I've told you for years, never talk politics, just talk business. Why are you the fear, right? He's called out everybody. Sure. So how much of that has to be with him calling out the people in power? They're like, if there's anybody we're not helping, we are definitely not helping Tate.
I would be guessing, but I certainly would think in a case that didn't involve maybe Andrew Tate, that the U.S. Embassy would have been more helpful when it involved a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, I would probably give the answer as well if I was in your situation. But for me and many other people that are listening, they would be thinking maybe there's some of that going on as well. Let me transition. I got the WhatsApp messages. I want to get to a part of that as well with the messages that came out. But the other question I would have for you is, with them saying, hey, now that these messages have come out, we are thinking I'm going to be suing them for $300 million. I'm sure you saw that tweet that came out. I saw your answer on this, but some of the audience may not know about it. Are they actively, personally, do they have access to the internet? Are they tweeting, or is all the tweets that are coming out or the messages or the email that's coming out, it's somebody else emailing, tweeting on behalf of Tates?
It's not. Yes, they don't have access to Twitter or social media. So they're in a jail cell with a very limited access to just phone calls that are all recorded. They don't have access to social media. So yes, they're not posting anything themselves.
Got it. You said phone calls that are all recorded. So whoever they have a call with, it's all recorded.
Yes.
And so even if you want to talk to your client, they're recording all the calls you're having with your client?
Yes. So as I said, it's very challenging
Oh
to
my God.
not be able to visit the client in person and to be, having limited communications, which of course, are recorded phone calls.
How do you strategize? How do you how do you say, hey, because you need intel, so who do you get intel from to be able to defend? There's only so much you're going to get if you can't have and you can't ask the question if you know it's going to be recorded, because who do you trust? If you know the calls are being recorded, you almost can't trust having any conversations with them, because it's all going to leak to somebody. How do you manage that?
We're aware of the fact that the calls are recorded, as are the clients, of course. And at this point, the strategy really is just for us to try to get to the truth. And how do we find the truth? So it's obviously limiting, and we keep the conversations short and discuss what we need to, but it poses certainly a big challenge.
Tina, is that also the case in America? So if you want to talk to a client of yours and you're going to go and have a conversation with them, is it 100% recorded? You have to assume that everybody else can hear the conversation, or are you able to have one-on-one convo with your client without anybody hearing it?
So typically jail calls are always recorded. Now, when it's an attorney call and you announce that at the beginning of the call and you say, this is Tina Glandian, this is an attorney-client phone conversation, they're either supposed to stop the recording, or later, if it was automatically recorded, they are not to listen to anything that's attorney-client. So even if that gets bypassed in some cases, they can't use it because they're not allowed to record the attorney-client communications. But it's not unusual, because calls are also recorded here. However, when you get to visit in person in an attorney-client context, you should be in a setting that's not recorded.
Do you trust it in America? Like, is it even a thought? Like, do you guys as a group sit there and say, listen, ask the question, but make sure it's not all the questions. Just be aware that somebody could be listening to it. Or is it a code where it's like, no, talk freely. As long as you say it's a lawyer, you don't have anything to worry about?
No, we're always a little bit cautious, because again, rules get broken, and just because someone's not supposed to do something doesn't mean it won't happen. So we are cautious in all cases.
Sure. So, during COVID, I've run an insurance company. I've been in the financial industry for 20 years. So you're dealing with lawyers all the time. I've spent a lot of money on lawyers. So we've kept a lot of law firms in business because you have to deal with it. But during COVID, when we were dealing with lawyers or courts, everything was super slow. And I'm talking, hey, things that would get done in 30, 60, 90 days, 9 months to 12 months to get anything. They're not coming in. They're not doing this. They're not doing that. And it was very annoying because you couldn't get things to be resolved quickly. Are you dealing with any other factors that is delaying you being able to get to the bottom of what's going on there? Or is it just purely the government saying, hey, this is how slow we're working. We can take our time if we want to, and there's nothing you can do about it?
With their procedure, with their preventative arrest procedure that they have in place, they certainly, have the protection that they could extend this to 180 days. And there really isn't much we can do if they continue to try to take the position that they shouldn't be released because, they might be a flight risk or they're a potential danger and things of that nature. So I do find normally that in high profile cases, because there are so many eyes on a case, typically those tend to move a bit faster than maybe a normal case would, that gets put on the back burner and nobody's in a rush to prosecute that. So typically they do move a little faster. Now, in this case, this has been an extremely slow investigation. So I know they've been in custody since the end of December, but what a lot of people might not recognize is this investigation actually started in April of 2022. And there was allegations made at the time. Police did a raid, they investigated, and there was nothing to those allegations. So, but they did open up, a bigger investigation. And another fact, because you did bring up the $300 million, you made some reference to a potential lawsuit about that. Mm-hmm. And so just to make this clear, what happened is after this investigation happened in April, and it was shown that the allegations were false and the police, made no arrests at the time, the Tate brothers actually filed criminal complaints in Romania against the two women who made these accusations. And again, that's not a fact that's been widely reported, but that is an open criminal investigation against the women. And that started, almost 8 months before the Tate brothers were ever arrested or, investigated really for any the criminal accusations that they're currently being investigated for. So the lawsuit that you referenced and the cease and desist letter, that is part of that original criminal complaint that was initiated in April by the brothers when they were not charged or being investigated for anything further, and when they were the victims of false allegations and they were pursuing their legal rights.
And that was in April. So from April till February now, but they put him in jail. The timing of that, to me, there's a lot of theories out there, and I'll just pose the question. You're a pro. You're going to give whatever response you're going to give. Sometimes, certain events happen. It could be ironic. It could be like coincidental. Or it could be like, it's a little bit, you kind of crossed the line with who you went after with the Greta Thunberg and all this other stuff, and here's what you did, and boom, and then all of a sudden 2 days. Could they have done what they did to the Tate brothers, what they did 2 days after Greta? Could they have done the same exact thing and started detention in April, in May, in June? You know what I'm saying? Like, could they have just automatically said, hey, why not wait till this time? It just so happens they did it 2 days after that. So there's some theories where maybe he crossed the line a little bit. You're pushing a little bit too much of the envelope. And this is the time to take this guy down and silence him.
So I guess to break it down a little bit, what they were initially, the allegations that were made in April were that these women were being held against their will by the Tate brothers. And that was investigated, and that there was absolutely no truth to that. So they were not, their status when the investigation started of the Tate brothers were as witnesses. And so Romania has different categories that they put people in. You could either be a witness, a suspect, or a defendant. So they started in April. They were witnesses to this allegation. The police investigated. There was nothing there. And that's what the criminal complaints that they filed in April were about, those particular instances. Now, since that time, I think, police began to surveil the brothers and were, I think, trying to find something to further investigate. And again, I don't want to speculate as to the reasons why they were trying to, find further allegations to investigate. But the timing of it, yes, it's obviously, it was many, many months later. What may have triggered that particular date, it's hard to say. So in other words, they could have done that earlier, right? So they could have, because if it's all allegedly human trafficking and rape, they could have done it in August. They could have done it in July. They could have done it in June. They just so happened to choose to do it 2 days after that. And I know that whole one thing where people were like, well, if you're going to order pizza, why would you put the pizza? That was already debunked, and that's not even a part of the conversation. If they wanted to get him, they're going to get him. It's not like they're going places they're not going, avoiding places. This is specific about the fact that could the government have come in and taken him to jail and put him in detention in any other month except the time that they did it at? Yes, because again, this is preventative arrest. It's not like they had, enough evidence to charge them with crimes. This was a preventative arrest because they were investigating. They certainly could have done this, weeks earlier if that's what they chose to do.
So what that does is that gives a lot of credence to the audience that is saying this guy's being set up because of who he called out in the establishment. To that audience that goes, I told you so. I knew this. I know. Well, you're giving them credit if you're doing it this way. So I almost think that works against them and it works in your favor. Why are you waiting this long until you're doing X, Y, Z?
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.